Good evening at 6 o'clock in the council chambers. Tuesday, May 14th, starting the council meeting, roll call to order. Roll call. Woo! Yes. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Identify possible conflicts of interest. Seeing none, we have one change in the agenda. We are going to do item O before item N. So if you just want to note that on your agenda, item O will come before item N. Item D, public comment period correspondence. At this time, I will recognize those members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Our first is Laura Abel. Laura, would you come to the podium and give us your address? Please, and you have 5 minutes. There's a little button to push for the microphone on that little round thing by the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, is it on? Okay. Laura Abel, 1900 South Vine Avenue. And I'm here tonight because I was listening to the radio broadcast this morning, and I heard the mayor and Steve Barg talking about things, and, oh, I better get a note. The mayor was explaining the selection of the new council member. Do I have that right?
A planning commission member. Yes. Planning commission, okay. And she explained how she came to that conclusion. And then there was some concern because someone didn't know him. And I sure understand that. You want to know about that. And they were speaking of Jake Bernardi. And I'm really not surprised that they hadn't heard of him because Jake quietly goes about doing his business. Things get done and you don't really know it. And he doesn't blow his own horn or anything. He just goes about doing that. And I've known Jake for almost 15 years, I guess. And I've been on the board of administration over at Emmanuel with him for almost a year. And he's a good guy. He's just a good guy. But I've seen his leadership, his common sense wisdom, and he just goes about and gets things done. He's a soccer coach, just volunteers a lot of time at the church and the school. And let me see. Yeah. And then probably, I'm not going to need 5 minutes, heavens to Betsy, because if you don't know of Jake, you've seen some of his results. And this has been going on at least for 13 years, probably longer. About the end of October, right across the street at Emmanuel in that parking lot, it gets pretty busy. It's called Trunk and Treat. And he is the mastermind of that. He implements it, and he just gets people to help him out. He doesn't really go about asking. He's going to do it. And if you want to jump on his wagon, he's happy to have you. But so you've seen the results of what Jake quietly does. And he would never tell you this. But it's a community outreach. Everybody's invited for candy, free. It's a safe place to be. So I guess that's it. Any questions? Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Any other citizens' comments? Any other citizens' comments? Third time, no citizens' comments. Move on to item E, approval of minutes, April 23rd, 2024, regular meeting, April 23rd, 2024, orientation meeting, and May 7th, 2024, special meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Giles. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Riedel?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item F, staff updates.
Mr. Tucci has one this evening.
Well, we have some more good news. This week, we were notified by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation that 2 city projects were awarded STP Urban dollars. The first one being East 4th Street, Maple Avenue to Vine Avenue, and the total project construction cost is estimated at $2,060,000. The federal share that will be shared with this project is $1,200,000, and the city share is expected to be about $860,000. The other project is South Vine Avenue from 2nd Street to 4th Street. The total project cost at $1.14 million, with a federal share at about $624,000 and city share at $516,000. So we got 2 more grants for the city.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Mayor's comments. I have 2 proclamations to read this evening. The first one will be for Ava Gardner. City of Marshfield, Wisconsin proclamation, 2024 WIAA Division I State Wrestling Champion, 100-pound weight class. Whereas Ava Gardner, passionate about wrestling, is currently a junior at Marshfield Senior High in the wrestling team. And whereas Ava's desire to be a wrestler began in the 2nd grade, and she is determinedly pushing her forward as a freshman. And whereas Ava's hard work, determination, and passion led her to an incredible 2023-24 season with a record of 27-1 versus girls and 40 versus 9 combined record versus boys and girls overall record in the 2023-24 season. And whereas of those 27 wins, includes her state championship victory over the returning 2nd state champion by a score of 17-4 in the 100-pound 2024 WIAA State Individual Wrestling Tournament at the Cole Center in Madison. Way to go, Ava. And whereas, good, everybody, yes, absolutely. Whereas Ava is a Marshfield's first female state wrestling champion, now etched on a plaque hanging in the school's wrestling room. And whereas in addition to Ava's success, at a state level, she also placed 3rd at the national championship tournament. Wow, Ava. And now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Lois T. Strake, Mayor of the City of Marshfield, do hereby ask the Common Council and the citizens of Marshfield to join in celebrating and honoring Ava Gardner for her accomplishments in wrestling and her state wrestling championship title for Division I 100-pound weight class by proclaiming Tuesday, May 14th, 2024 as Ava Gardner's Day in Marshfield, Wisconsin. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and seal this May 14th, 2021. Lois T. Strake, Mayor. Ava. And thank you and congratulations. Thank you all. Yes. There's a hard act to follow, right? We have one more proclamation, which is just as important because all proclamations are in the city of Marshfield. City of Marshfield, Wisconsin proclamation, observation of Memorial Day. Whereas Memorial Day was first observed in 1868, it was established to honor those who gave their lives in the Civil War. Since then, each year in May, Americans pause to observe Memorial Day, a special day and national holiday since 1971, set aside to remember with dignity. And whereas the day of Monday, May 27th, has been set aside to honor the veterans who fought and died for our country and help preserve the freedoms and rights guaranteed to all people under the U.S. Constitution. And whereas on Memorial Day, it is of utmost importance to hold in high regard the memories of our friends and family members who have made the ultimate sacrifice and to remember the significant contributions they made to enhance our lives. Whereas we pray for peace throughout the world, remembering all that is gained and all that is lost during times of war. And now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Lois T. Strake, Mayor of the City of Marshfield, do proclaim Monday, May 27th, 2024, Memorial Day, and I urge our citizens to observe this day with fighting dignity and appreciate thought of our fallen heroes. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and seal this May 14th, 2024, Lois T. Strake, Mayor. Now, we invite you all, of course, to come Monday, the 27th. The parade will kick off at 9:30 in front of St. John's on Blodgett, and then go up the end of the street, and then go down St. Joseph's Avenue and up to Hillside Cemetery, where there'll be a ceremony, and that will start about 10:15. Hope that you all make it. It is something that will make your heart even warmer, and you will have more respect for the fallen heroes and the heroes that are still here. Thank you. Item H, council comments. Seeing none. City Administrator's update.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two things tonight. The first one is rescheduling. Hopefully the budget meeting that we talked about having in the past, getting ready for the 2025 budget development process. We've been waiting on the audit and trying to get a few things taken care of, but we are looking at having it on Tuesday, June 11th at 5 p.m. and having the council meeting that night, the regular meeting, move back a half an hour to 6:30 p.m. We'll confirm that with you. Let me know if you have a problem with attending that, but otherwise we'll definitely confirm that at the next meeting, if not before. So plan on that, Tuesday, June 11th at 5 o'clock for a budget meeting here in City Hall, council chambers. The other thing I want to do is I want to touch on, just to respond to some comments made at the last council meeting on Tuesday, May 7th. They were made by Ken Bargander during public comment. First, I want to start by just thanking Ken for his service to the community. He's been on council, he's been on Economic Development Board, Historic Preservation. I just appreciate all the time and energy and effort he's put into public service. Having said that, he did raise some things I want to address. The first issue that Mr. Bargander raised during his comments was having to do with the removal of certain temporary signs that were being put out for historic preservation. We do want to promote our city's history, but the code that we have about not allowing signs in the right-of-way is for every sign we have. It goes across the board, whether it be private, nonprofit, city, that there should not be signs in the public right-of-way, and that's why he received the email that he did from zoning administrator Bob Larson. Mr. Bargander also, by the way, we do respond to these as we become aware of them. They come up all the time, especially during the summer, but we get on them as we are informed of them and as complaints come in. He also expressed concern with code enforcement in general. The code enforcement is really handled by Bob Larson and Kayla Wolf. They've been our ordinance officers for a number of years, and now they do a dual role between ordinance officer and zoning administration here in this building. I literally cannot say enough about the job these two individuals do, and it's a difficult job. Once upon a time, I was doing code enforcement in one of the Twin Cities suburbs many years ago, and I know how challenging a job it is when you're trying to balance, trying to get things taken care of with trying to be reasonably personable and treat the people fairly as you hopefully clean up some nuisances. I respect the effort that Bob and Kayla put into gaining compliance through cooperative measures when they can. Doesn't always work out. Sometimes you end up citing people and sending them through the court process, but they make every effort to try and resolve things short of that, and I appreciate it. Code enforcement is hard for another reason. You may not think that something's happening when you make a complaint. This may be the council, this may be a citizen tuned in right now, but you really don't see what's going on because it's a long process sometimes. We oftentimes send a letter and then a second letter, and then we end up citing people and sending them to court. And they may plead not guilty. And there may be a long time before a court trial or a court hearing. And when that happens, they may pay a fine or they may appeal it. I mean, these things take way longer to resolve than the average person would know. That doesn't mean something's not happening when you make a complaint. So if you do make a complaint, and I'm speaking to anybody hearing me in this room or on TV or whatever, follow up with it and see what's going on, because usually something is happening toward compliance. Mr. Bargander referenced that he and Mr. Butke had come up with a list back in 2021 of some places that needed attention. I've been apprised of that. I've had a chance to become familiar with that list. And most of those issues have been resolved since then in one way or another, is my understanding. That includes the fact that we do not have a recorded complaint back of 208 and 210 Peach Avenue, which was referenced by Mr. Bargander. However, having mentioned that to the ordinance and zoning officials, they have now gone out and begun the process on that one to work toward compliance on those two parcels. Also referenced by Mr. Bargander was the Heritage Drive fire that occurred back in April. The idea that lack of enforcement created a nuisance that allowed that fire to happen. In talking with the zoning code officers, they made it clear to me that they had been on that, there'd been a complaint, they followed up, they were in the enforcement process, and a compliance date was set for cleanup of the exterior storage on that parcel. And it was during that time period, before the compliance date came up, that the fire actually occurred. So there were considerable efforts to try and secure compliance in that case as well. At the end of his remarks, Mr. Bargander also kind of suggested that perhaps Mr. Larson wasn't the person for the job, and I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Bargander. I'm not saying that Kayla Wolf or Bob Larson is perfect. I know it was a hard go when I was a code enforcement officer back in my day, but they are outstanding employees who work hard every day. They have many complaints, especially this time of year. So please give them grace if you file a complaint, because they do pile up in the spring and early summer from people seeing things out in the yards and along the way that need to be tended to. So my advice to Mr. Bargander and anyone else hearing me right now is if you have a concern, please call or stop by and see them. They're personable, they're helpful, and they will address the concern that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Berg. Item J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, consent agenda, meeting minutes, reports. Motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Fire. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. We can skip item L because action on items removed, there were none removed. Item N, second reading of ordinance number 1510, repeal and replace chapter 9 of the Marshfield Municipal Code, licenses and permits, presented by Jessica Scherfel, City Clerk.
Good evening. I really don't have anything to add this evening. We reviewed on the April meeting the first reading of the complete repeal and replace of Chapter 9, covering licensing and permits. I have not had any phone calls from anyone in the interim, so I'm taking that to mean that everything is great. But of course, I welcome any questions you may have tonight. If not, we'd be looking for approval.
We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Tompkins. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Move on to item O, request to affirm the council's July 25th, 2023 decision to authorize construction of public bathrooms on the Wenzel Family Plaza site, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this obviously ties to conversations that were held at the 2 council meetings in April regarding the plan of putting bathrooms, permanent restrooms on Wenzel Family Plaza site just to the north of the pergola there by West 2nd Street. There were comments made by members of the public on April 9th, raising some concerns and indicating that they don't want to see that happen there. And at the meeting on April 23rd, some members of the council also voiced some questions and concerns regarding the placement of the restrooms, and it seemed like there was a desire to at least revisit this in conversation. Before I present my report, I just want to say that I apologize. I wish I'd gotten some of this stuff to you earlier. I intended to. I think many of you know that we had a housing project in TIF District 13 that's been occupying a lot of the time of me and many other staff members, and some other things happening here, but I do apologize for that. If the decision here tonight is to wait till 2 weeks from now to make a final decision, I would respectfully understand as well. But I want to give you a good background of how we got here and what brought us to this point, what the options are today. So just following from my report, in history, just briefly, several years ago when the plaza was constructed, we talked about permanent restrooms. There was always a desire to have them someday. It was thought that it would be soon, but finances and other reasons, it didn't get to happen. But we did always know we wanted to revisit it. In 2021, the project was first placed in the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. And then in 2022, after discussions with council, it was moved up from 2025 to 2023, a desire to see this improvement happen sooner rather than later. The location shown at that point, and we'll get to the map here in a minute, was on the northeast side of the property. Not exactly the one we're talking about today, but closer to that alleyway on the Wenzel Family Plaza property though. Since July 22, 11 different sites, and you've seen the map before, you've got it in front of you again, were considered and reviewed by our Park and Recreation Director and others looking for the best location for the restrooms. The list of action steps and a project timeline is shown on the attached site. I thank Justin for his work in putting together that timeline to show all the various things that happened with meetings and other things to bring us to this point here in May of 2024. Financing plan, just to review, the expected cost of the Wenzel Family Plaza restrooms was $250,000 at the time that this was put into the CIP. The funding was intended to be as follows: $185,000 from the Economic Development Fund, or what many of us here call the 205 Fund. And then the remaining $65,000 would be from room tax revenues. We did, however, apply for a Wood County grant through the SEED Committee, and were awarded $12,500. The request, I think, was $25,000, and it was cut in half as the SEED Committee, with guidance from the Operations Committee and the County Board, made some reductions to narrow down the list of those who were awarded funds. So the net city cost at that point would be $237,250. The estimated project expenses back in 2023, when we were working on this, the building being about $161,000, utilities roughly $46,000, another $26,000 for architectural and engineering work, and then about $16,000 for site work and sidewalks, for a total of just a shade under that amount that we talked about earlier of being $250,000. The costs incurred to date, we paid $8,557 as of the end of April for design work that's been performed. There's been another $30,726 of charges incurred. We have an invoice for that. As indicated on my note below the costs incurred, you see that under B, that second one is to finalize design and construction documents and the beginning of bid documents. I should say at this point that at some point I may look out to Justin for guidance, and I may actually ask him to come to the podium, but I want you to know that the reason we've gotten into that second part that involves construction documents and even the beginning of bid documents is because we've had stop and start. I mean, it's been like, it's going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. If you recall at the last meeting, Jessica mentioned during the meeting, looking it up on the computer, that it was back in July of 2023 that the council actually voted to move forward with the project, putting the bathrooms where they're being proposed today. So we had every reason to believe that that was going to go forward, and there was work being done in accordance with that. Among the options explored, and again, you can take a look at that map of 11 sites that I handed out and put on your desk again tonight. There were several that were given serious consideration. 4 of the total sites were on the Wenzel Family Plaza property. The other 7 were on surrounding parcels. Among the sites that received the most review and consideration in the process were the former Out of the Blue Patu Parlor, which is just to the east of the Family Plaza site along the south side of West 2nd Street. In June 2023, the owners were asking for $250,000 when we met with them. They also wanted naming rights. That didn't come to pass. Farther on down the road, earlier this year, we reconnected with them, and there were discussions being held about whether there'd be an opportunity for both the Recreation Department and the Communications Department. At that time, they'd reduced the amount to $187,000, still nearly 3 times above the assessed value, maybe a little bit short of that. But we did counter with the assessed value of $78,000, and the owner did not respond to that counter offer. There were also renovation costs to make the bathrooms what they needed to be. I don't have a dollar amount on those, but they would have added to the cost a fair amount as well, it appears. Another building that we looked at was, believe it or not, the former Baltus building that the city acquired from the Baltus family to initially just store cars for the police department. That's a temporary use. The goal ultimately is to have a much more significant use tied to the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan. But it's been a successful use to allow us to have storage of vehicles and equipment for the Marshfield Police Department. We looked at it, many staff members went out there. It was determined that the remodeling cost would be very high and that the location was undesirable, partly because it's a key site for future development to the West 2nd Street corridor, and then also partly because it was on the other side of Chestnut and West 2nd Street, making it a little bit more of a traffic concern for young people and others who would cross to use the bathrooms from the Wenzel Family Plaza site. In June 2023, we also started a dialogue with the Howards, owners of the Blodgett House. At that time, it was based on the idea that the back part of the building could possibly be remodeled for plaza restroom use, and the city would lease that space. At one point later, the Communications Department showed interest as well, and we got them involved in the process. They looked at it together with Justin to see if it might be something that could be workable to split off part of the building for those 2 departments. Ultimately, there were some logistical issues, and the expected rent was fairly high, as you see there in my write-up, well over $3,000 a month. And so we felt at this point it was probably not the best idea to look at dividing that commercial building for those purposes. We also looked at the High Street Salon Building at 210 South Central. Back in August of 2023, we started that discussion. Staff from multiple departments again toured this building. The asking price at that time was in the range of $400,000, which was pretty high, obviously, for what we were looking to pay. An idea was subsequently floated that there might be a possibility of a private business wishing to purchase the building, or at least occupy part of the building in the front along Central, if the city might be interested in taking occupancy of the back half of the building for one or both of these uses, either the restrooms or the communications department, or both. That was looked at as well. Ultimately, the decision was made to move the communications department to City Hall at that time. And in the end, the cost would have been left over for the city for what we were getting, and the logistical issues of converting and segregating a part of that building were also making it a little bit challenging. So this was not pursued any farther either. I also note on my report that locations in the parking lot or road, and there are several on your map, several locations that would have occupied parking spaces. That was not pursued because that was opposed and has been opposed in many conversations by members of the public and downtown business people, because there's a desire not to lose more parking spaces in the downtown area. So as I mentioned before, at recent council meetings, this has been discussed. On April 9th, we heard from 2 local business owners who I respect for their comments. They have concerns about the impact on their businesses and the general aesthetics involved in putting a building of this type on the plaza, particularly where it would be located. The council also put this on the agenda for April 23rd. And as I mentioned before, there were questions and issues and concerns raised at that time about the project cost, about the appropriate location for the restrooms and whether this is the right spot, and whether all other options had actually been fully reviewed. The intent of this report that I've been reading from tonight is to really answer hopefully as many of those questions as I can. So at this point, and I'll take questions in a minute, but at this point, it appears the council has 3 main alternatives. Number 1, to proceed with the project as planned, with construction on site behind the pergola. The second would be to suspend the process, looking for more time to discuss it, and/or directing staff to consider more or different locations. Or 3, to determine not to pursue permanent restrooms for the plaza until further notice. Just note for yourself that under option 2 or option 3, the funds spent to date would not have future value for the project if we use another location. And also the seed grant that needs to be spent, as I probably mentioned before, maybe I didn't, that money needs to be spent by December 31st, 2024, or we would not have it for our future use for this project. So with that in mind, the staff recommends that the council affirm its previous decision from July 25th, 2023, and direct the project to proceed as currently planned, subject to review and assessment of the additional information provided, and if that leads this body in another direction.
A motion by Alderman Giles. Do we have a second to that motion? Second by Alderman Stauber. Any discussion?
Wait, motion is.
The motion is to affirm the previous decision to authorize construction of public restrooms at the Wenzel Family Plaza.
Thank you. And Alderman Stauber, you will second that? Now, is there any discussion? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a few things that I would like to speak to, but first, as a representative of the people in the city, I've actually gone out and just spoken to random people that I just find at the YMCA, on the trail, people who are gardening, and I just said, hey, what do you think about spending this much money on bathrooms or just having porta potties down at Wenzel Plaza? And I have talked to young people, parents, I've talked to a lot of elderly people. So I had face-to-face conversations, and this was face-to-face conversations. This isn't on the phone. This was, 20 minutes of conversation with 57 people in the last 2 weeks. 25 of them were retired and 26 would be in the working range. Out of those people, 57 people, not all out of my district, but they all were Marshfield residents. I actually eliminated people who weren't Marshfield residents. 2 people said they weren't sure, because at the end I would say, how would you vote? Would you vote to spend the money on these bathrooms, or would you vote to continue with porta potties? 2 said they weren't sure. 1 person said no, and 54 people said build them. You have the money, build them. Porta potties are not ideal. And there were so many different reasons. They gave reasons of, it's nasty, it smells bad. But people gave reasons about things that they needed to do in bathrooms. Elderly people talked to me about medical things that they needed to do in bathrooms and how they didn't get to go to these places if they didn't have good bathrooms. Parents talk to me about how hard it is to have multiple children and one of them has to go poop, not pee in the water, and they don't know what to do with the rest of their children in a porta potty. Do they bring them all in? Do they leave some of them out and have a 5-year-old watch a 1-year-old? The amount of stories that people told me about how difficult it was to use public spaces if there wasn't an adequate bathroom where they could wash their hands. I had women talking to me about menstruating and how they needed to wash their hands afterwards. So there were a lot of conversations, and most of these taxpayers said, you already have the money, just build the bathrooms. So this is a matter of dignity. So I'm speaking to dignity. 2, I'm speaking to government efficiency, because we told our staff to do this, and then we're putting a pause on it. And there's a lot of people who complain about being inefficient in government, and that's what we just did as a council. We've spent money, and if we don't use the money, then we're also wasting money because we gave them a directive. So I'm speaking to us as a council giving direction and leadership to staff, and then us suddenly changing our minds or saying, I don't know, maybe this wasn't a good plan. That's not great leadership. And then finally, I just want to speak to the fact that the funding is there and none of this funding comes from property tax. And it was given by the Economic Development Board from the Marshfield Utilities because it was seen as this is a destination spot. So people would want to come to Marshfield. It would be one of the attractions to bring people to Marshfield, to bring people to our downtown, to spend money in our downtown. So I just speak to those 3 things to say that yes, building public buildings is expensive, but it's also very important for those 3 reasons. Thank you.
Alderman Varsho?
I don't like Site 11. I'd rather see it on Site 2 or Site 4. Don't get me wrong, losing 2 or 3 parking lots. People find places to park. You've been down to Maple Fall Fest? People find places to park. They park on the side of the hill. I mean, probably shouldn't, but they do. You find places to park. I don't like it behind the pergola there, okay? I also have concerns of what's gonna happen down the road, the maintenance. Will it be locked up at night? Is it gonna be open 24/7? Is it going to be heated all winter long so the pipes don't freeze? What if it gets vandalized? Are we replacing a toilet every 6 months? Are we replacing a sink every 6 months? Because it's unlocked 24/7. But I do not like the site on 11. The site on 2, we own the property right there. And the picture you show here, if the cars were full in that parking lot, it'd be a little bit better of a, we don't want to lose parking spots, but the parking lot's not full. And I've been down to Winds's Plaza. There's at night when they have bands and stuff, people find places to park. If they park 2 or 3 blocks away and they walk, that's fine. We have a parking lot right here on 5th Street. There's a parking lot right there on 2nd Street. They'll find spots to park. I'd rather see it those 2 sites, but I do have concerns about the maintenance moving forward after putting it up.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. My position hasn't changed on this since we first started talking about this a year and a half ago, something like that. I was on the planning team for the creation of the plaza. And we did consider this right from the beginning. We would decide, we looked at it. We also worked with the people over in Wausau about 4th Street Plaza. And they said, whatever you do, don't put bathrooms in here on this site. You know, and then in their case, they've got more businesses around than I think we do, but there are businesses that can, you know, there are bars and restaurants and things like that. We designed this thing knowing that this kind of thing, this kind of push would come along eventually. And that's why I was very heartened. I remember I was still sick when I called him, I found out that we had the police building, the old Baltus building. And I said, you know what? If you look back over the planning documents for this plaza, that Baltus building was identified as being a place for like a arcane or something like an entranceway into this West 2nd Street district. It's going to be a district, not just one building. Okay. And basically, and that's got, in my mind, it had plenty of room in there. I thought we should do it in one. I do not, for the life of me, understand why everybody's so hurried, anxious to actually denigrate. I'm looking for the right words here because all of them are flowing to my mouth at one time. Denigrate the design and the purpose of that plaza itself. One last thing. You're going to have to hire somebody to take care of it 24/7. If you're going to have it open during the winter, you're going to have somebody out there in the winter. You're going to have somebody out there in the summer to manage it. You're going to have somebody out there to clean it. It's going to be that. The $250,000 is not the end of it. And I disagree. I think I think being wise with the taxpayers' money or with money that comes from the seed committee or comes from the 205 fund or whatever, it's still more economical not to throw into a situation which is going to cost you more money in the future. And that's what this is going to do. So I'm going to vote against this thing. I wanted to pause and I wanted to take another look at things like that, the Baltus building. There may be others that are coming up soon. I guess we missed an opportunity with another one that, no, that's the tattoo parlor thing that we lost the opportunity with. But anyway, I want us to look forward, and I want us to look forward to how we do it with class and thrift. So thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mayor. Contrary to Alderperson Tompkins, I've had the exact different experience, the opposite of that. I did not go out and try to find people to talk to, but I had numerous people talk to me. We can look at this several different ways, but in my opinion, she is correct. The money came as an economic development source, but as we just discussed a few weeks ago with the economic development money that comes from the utility, much of what we do in this city is economic development and would fall under that umbrella. So as we're coming into a budget season where we are going to be looking at budget cuts again, we have lost a significant amount of revenue from Marshfield Clinic lawsuit. We have employees that we need to take care of here that we just had a wage study done on. Please, someone tell me where that money is coming from. We can't retain people the way it is. They need to be taken care of. So there is no doubt in my mind that $250,000 could be used to replace city funding for economic development issues and free up some money to take care of the other issues that really need to be taken care of. I cannot vote yes on something that even our largest downtown property owners are frustrated with. They don't like it there. They're putting more into this city than anybody in this room, and I respect their opinion on it. There are opportunities that will come up that we could look at this in the future. I still think combining multiple entities into this is the way to go. Let's remember, we have 2 toilets here. People are going to be awful sick of that in a very short time too, and there's still going to be porta potties there. The whole thing when this was moved forward was to eliminate or greatly reduce the porta potties on that site. It's not going to do it. I will not be supporting it as is. Thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Couple of things. I fully support the idea of bathrooms at this park, and I've voiced that a number of times. I'm not going to keep repeating my desire to see bathrooms at this park. I agree with Alderman Varsho. I absolutely think the site chosen doesn't make a bit of sense to me. But that aside, I'm out in the public all the time. You know, I go to lunch a couple times a week or go to coffees, and I meet people constantly. People always laugh at me because I'll say, well, I've seen them at Starbucks. I've seen them at Starbucks. I've seen them at Starbucks. It just happens to be I go out and I talk to a lot of people. And my experience has been overwhelmingly that people are shocked at $250,000 for 2 bathrooms. I had asked to get a price on getting porta potty there that would facilitate all of the things that Alderperson Thompson mentioned. It would allow for, they're large, they would allow for a full family to go in, they would allow for women to take care of their business, it would allow for medical, people who need medical, you know, whether it's to give themselves a diabetic shot or what have you. I'm not even gonna get into that, but I'm talking about porta potties that are not those little blue one poop in a hole type of porta potty. And I still haven't heard a price on that. And I, in good conscience, I did not approve that $250,000. I was not at that meeting. I believe I was on vacation actually for that one. So I did not approve that amount. I would not have approved that amount had I been at that meeting, and I will stand behind that. Overwhelmingly, the people I hear from think it's absolutely beyond ridiculous.
Alderman Stauber?
A number of statements and assumptions were made. I guess I would like to hear from Justin, Parks and Rec on a few things. One, the design, I'm assuming it would be an ADA compliant facility. I would like to know how that would be maintained in our Parks and Rec cycle, and any costs maybe that we don't see in front of us right now over time.
I think your first question was, would it be ADA accessible? Yes, it would be ADA accessible. It would be a family changing room on both, so either male or female could use either side. As for maintenance, it would be assumed by our maintenance budget. We have our restrooms under a contract. We contract that out every 5 years, and that would fall under their cycle. We'd work with them on whatever cleaning cycle would be appropriate. For any events or activities like a concert series or even a wine walk, we'd work with those event organizers on getting them access. Our bathrooms are currently programmable locks, so they open at a certain time and lock at a certain time. We also have our police officers who go around and check the bathrooms and check our park facilities to make sure things are locked or things are where they should be. So for maintenance, we would just assume it like everything else and stock it, and winterize it'd be a year-round facility. So most likely it would lock probably around 9 o'clock at night. That's typically when our park restrooms lock in the evening, and then open typically around 7 a.m.
How many public, if I could, how many public restrooms do we have ballpark?
Ballpark about 9.
9, okay. And I'll continue unless someone has questions for Parks and Rec.
Go ahead. Alderman Stauber, you have the floor.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Administrator Bard, for the background and the play-by-play. I joined the council after this was well underway and discussions and decisions were made. So I appreciate the background. I appreciate the alderman who engaged directly with citizens, whether on the receiving end or initiated conversations. That's good information. So historic perspective, the old guy here. Veterans Parkway, I can't remember the year that we designed and built that. I want to say maybe 2000, somewhere in there. And when I think of Veterans Parkway, I think of Mike Fire, because he's the guy that came up with the name for it. So thank you, Mike. But there's another name on Veterans Parkway, and that's Stauber Overpass. That's the pedestrian overpass, which goes between the baseball diamonds to the north. And we had a number of residents come forward and express concerns over child safety trying to cross the parkway. And I think it was during Board of Public Works, we made a running change on that project to include an overpass. And it wasn't a small ticket item, it was $650,000. So you could look at it as an omission in the original plan, but we made a change to the plan and included the pedestrian overpass. In today's dollars, that would be about $1.2 million to build that again. So the street department gave it the name Stauber Overpass, which I thought was kind of funny, but you know, you kind of look back, you make big decisions, and you have resident safety and convenience in mind, and then you hope that it's for the best, and you hope that you get the cost benefit and all that. When you think of restrooms at $250,000, it does sound like a lot of money. I appreciate the fact that it's not coming directly from the tax roll. Again, I'm coming in new, but I appreciate the background, and I think it's time for us to be a little bit more efficient and move ahead with the project. Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
I just wanted to clarify that because it's going to be winterized, it is heated, and that is also part of the cost that makes it a little more than what normal bathrooms would be. Also, for building the cost. Is that right, Justin?
It will be a year-round facility because of the ice skating and the number of winter events that we want down there. So it'll be usable year-round, so there'll be heat inside of it, yes.
I do think that we should continue to look at the benefits, the economic benefits of this plaza. We present an image to people who come into our city. And if you have porta potties, if you have rental trailers, that's an image of being cheap. And I don't think that's an image we want to portray. We are also trying to bring in new workers and families, and we want to have facilities for them that say you're important. This is a great place for you to live and to move to. And when we talk about Mr. Wagner saying that there's extra money that you're, worried about for maintenance and things like that, this building, if it was to last for 30 years, by the time we rent porta potties for 30 years, that's a ton of money that we're already spending that we would be spending on maintenance. I think 30 years of 3 months only of porta potties, not porta potties for the winter events, not porta potties for spring events, just 3 months. That's $90,000, and that's before all these prices go up. So $90,000, we're just going to rent things instead of just building something. It just feels like we're afraid to do something because people say that's a lot of money. To do a new playground in a park is $100,000. If you were to say, can you believe the city's going to spend $100,000 on a playground? People would be like, no way. Yeah, things cost money. Commercial buildings are expensive. There's a lot more that goes into them. Mike O'Reilly should know this because he does electrical work on commercial buildings. It's different than residential. So yes, the things that we do are expensive. When we build a road, when we redid St. Joseph's Road, when I say to people, guess how much that cost to overlay that road? And people would be like, I don't know, was that like $80,000? I'm like, $700,000 to overlay St. Joe's. Everything we do is expensive, but we can't just stop doing things because they're expensive. We have the money, we've already paid for the plans. To pause this again, we are being an inefficient government.
Alderman Weigel?
I'll defer to Mr. Varsha and Mr. Wagner first.
Okay, because Mr. Varsha gave you the chance. It's up to you completely. Okay, Alderman
I'll return the
Varsha.
favor.
Okay.
Location 2 across the street needs to have sewer put in, correct?
Utilities would have to be extended plus meters. So
Okay.
there'll be additional cost to that.
Location 4 and location 9 on the side. Same thing?
No, but you would lose parking spaces somewhere between anywhere from 2 to 4.
And 10 behind the stage.
I can't put it there. There's all the utilities for the park, all electricals behind the stage.
Okay. So 4 and 9 wouldn't be it would just be losing parking.
Would be probably additional cost now that we have to redesign it and design utility extensions over there because we don't have anything designed for utility extensions there. We have utility extensions coming from the alleyway to the current location, which is 11, but we have no design on the other ones.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I have this question for Mr. Barg. Mr. Barg, are you aware of any real estate transactions that are taking place or have taken place recently that might alter our decision?
No?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm not personally.
Alderman Weigel?
Was it Ragel or O'Reilly?
You're next up, because then O'Reilly's next, because you said the other two. How's that?
Yep, perfect. Okay, so, man, I'm struggling with this one. Mainly because it's a zero-sum game. Unfortunately, no matter what decision we make, someone's gonna be upset. And unfortunately, this is why we're sitting in these 10 seats here, is because we have to make a tough decision. All three options that's been laid out, none of them are perfect. And so we have to just admit to the fact that we're not gonna please everyone. And it stinks. I don't like doing that. I'd rather be able to make everyone happy when we can't. And that's just the nature of the beast in this case. So we have to, accept that and move on. I know the number of the cost has come up a number of times. And frankly, and I say, and let me just preface this, when I say the word ignorant, I do not mean it disparagingly. It just simply means not knowing. I'm ignorant on all kinds of stuff. And when someone says, yeah, two stall bathrooms for $250K, that sounds like a lot of money, but someone in the know that knows how much work's going to be behind it understands that $250K is not that outrageous. I mean, any person who has a job that is an expert in what they do, you have someone come in who's not versed in that, and you tell them how much it costs to do X, Y, Z, they're going to say, holy cow, that's a lot of money. I shouldn't be spending that much. Take your pick. I'm not going to give examples because we all know what we do, and we know that someone who, isn't familiar with what they do is going to think, okay, I'm overcharging or whatever it is. But if we don't understand that that's kind of what building costs are, it's going to seem like a lot. So that doesn't really resonate with me. As far as, the suggestion that the 205 fund can be used for wages, I mean, I agree. I've been beating this drum since January, and frankly, I'm still perturbed that we're still not talking about the budget, but this is a one-time expense. I don't think we can use 205 funds to pay for wages increases. I mean, the wage increases have to come from something that's replenishing, not something that's going to be a one-off. So I don't find that overly convincing. Vandalism, like Justin said, we have people that are patrolling that, not to mention this is half a block away from the police department. I know people have audacity, but that's pretty audacious to do it, half a block away from the police department. And I think the bigger thing that bothers me about this whole thing is that, and right, wrong, or in between, wherever you want to fall in this, and like I said, because it's zero sum, we're all going to have different opinions. What troubles me is the fact that we made this decision back in July of 23. If I count correctly, and it's hard because I only have two hands, I think we get up to 8 months difference. In the last 8 months, nothing's happened. Nothing's changed. There's no new facts, no new developments, no new information that came over those 8 months. And suddenly at the 11th hour, once money's been invested, once we're ready to pull the trigger on a bid, something changes. I have a hard time swallowing that pill, because if this were truly that concerning, that would have come up much sooner than 2 meetings ago. And I think even more so, I think creates a dangerous precedent for not only staff, but people looking at us as leaders. We look wishy-washy. I mean, I'm all for changing our minds, but I need to be able to point to something and say, this is why I changed my mind, not just, well, I felt like changing it. I should be able to point to something and say, okay, costs went through the roof, or whatever it may be. And even now, if we go out for bid and it comes back at 400,000, the project's dead in the water. I mean, I have a hard time expecting staff to work their hardest and trust us when within 8 months we changed our mind, just at the gust of a breeze. I also have a hard time saying, these are really, truly voracious complaints or concerns when there have been 8 months. And frankly, odds are these people knew about it much earlier than the July vote. So the form to me is what really troubles me. I understand the content of it, and I think that we all can disagree and be reasonable with it, but I really have a hard time changing my mind without being able to point to something and saying, this is why I'm changing it. So I don't want to create doubt with staff. I don't want to create doubt with citizens of Marshfield. So I'm still voting for it. And we made that decision in July. We had 8 months to revisit it, and now we're at the 11th hour, and we decided to revisit it with no other alternatives. Once again, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but I have a very hard time not being able to point to something and say, okay, let's change our mind because of no reason. So, thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you again. I'd just like to clarify a couple points. First being that I do know what things cost, and in my personal opinion, it does not pay to spend this much money to get what we're getting. There's not the room for expansion. If you have to build another building, we could use 6 commodes in each of these. The cost difference to accomplish that is going to be per commode cost significantly reduced if we do it in a different setting than this. The big cost is getting your utilities there. If I'm not mistaken, Justin, power has to come from the south side of the park? Is that correct?
We did have power and utilities stubbed into the north side for the proposed restroom location. So there's stuff stubbed into the north side.
So there'll still be metering and everything on the north side then?
There'll be no metering, but there is power there. So power, sewer, water was stubbed in during the construction of this plaza, but whenever it was done, in preparation of a potential restroom building going in that location.
You're telling me it does not have to come across the plaza?
Well, it's shown on the map. It comes from the alley just to the east of the location. Due east is where the utilities are stubbed in.
Will you have to have a meter on your electrical?
No.
Unless it's coming from another meter, it does. So
our design review team reviewed it, as well as Pat Kilty and the electrical engineer, and whatever they decided for that, the meter was not required, but we can debate the meter thing.
Yeah, then it must,
people who know meter
come
stuff
from the service on property already. Does the road have to be cut up at all to get anything in, or
yeah, we have to cut up the alley because we got to get into that's where it is. It's in the alley.
So it didn't stub into the property?
It was stubbed into the closest location on the road, which is the alley, which was ripped up at the time. It is designed for expansion, so we can expand to the east and west if need be.
How much?
Well, perpetual, I guess. You can make it as many as you want. You can continue adding them. So it is designed to add 2 more. We can design at that point to add 2 more after that, or however far you want to take it, I guess.
I like that, other than the location. At least it sounds like that was in the thought process. So yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is I do understand the cost. And to Alderman Reigel's comment about the paying wages, no, that is not, I didn't think we would pay wages with the EDB. What I was referring to is much like the money that comes to the city of Marshfield from the utility having to be spent and focused on economic development, we can fill a lot of other holes that fall under economic development with the money, which frees up other money in our budget to cover some of the other costs. It's much like discussions we just had recently about the money coming from the utility. It's the same concept. I cannot support this. I won't. And if you guys decide to, that's fine, but you can be promised that it'll come up oftentimes during the budget process. I can tell you that.
Alderman Spiros?
So I'm just curious again, did we get a price for the rental of deluxe bathrooms? That's my number one question. Number two, in reference to Alderperson Rival's comments about it being approved in July and really nothing coming of then. I see 8 bullet points on this detailed list that Steve Barg made of things that have happened since the July approval at a closed session of the Common Council for $250,000 for some bathrooms. Number 3, I want to talk about the problems that we've had in the past with our previous bathrooms being vandalized, because I recall Justin himself standing up at that podium within the last couple of years talking about the vandalism in the bathrooms. So I assume they had the same locks then. Maybe we've switched them out. I kind of want to know that answer. And then also, I forget what my last point was, but if I can just get the answers to the questions I was asking, I would appreciate it.
I can take the first one. I think you asked about the deluxe rentable units. We did not pursue that just because it's a year-round facility. So that deluxe rentable unit is typically designed for an event, and then it's hauled away and serviced. If we purchased it, we'd have to figure out a way to service it. Maybe we rent it out from a local company, but with a year-round option, we'd have to consider its location. And then number one, how would it be ADA accessible or not ADA accessible? So it wasn't really pursued at that point. We're like, okay, there's obviously, if we don't go this direction, we can continue going the other direction. Maybe it is a deluxe one. And I didn't catch your second question, actually. I think it was like bullet number 3 or something.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk to you about previous vandalizing of restrooms. Like I say, I remember you coming to this podium and us having to find money to fix bathrooms. So our bathrooms are not vandal-free, despite the locks and all of that kind of thing. Our parks have been pretty torn up by vandals.
Yeah, so vandalism occurs not only inside the bathrooms, but outside in the park properties. It could be as simple as spray painting or breaking of picnic tables or basketball courts. We did have quite a incident last year involving S.J. Miller, in which they didn't really break into any bathrooms, but they definitely vandalized all the exterior parts with smashing windows, breaking things, a lot of spray paint. Our locks never really get broken into, so they don't break into the restroom, but they'll break the building itself. But I don't know if this building will get more or less vandalized than any of our other ones. I would assume more or less because it's close proximity to police and the amount of people that are in that area. But I really can't tell you.
And
if I knew that, I would tell you.
And I'm not holding you to that. I just don't like to make points out there or put points out there that may not necessarily be true. This bathroom is not going to be foolproof from vandalizing. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand, you know, because it kind of sounded like, hey, we've got great locks, we've got police patrol, we've got the lock on it. It's not going to be vandalized. That's impossible. And that's not to say that anybody's not doing their jobs. Everybody's doing their jobs. It's just teenagers are sort of bratty nowadays, and they do bratty things a lot of times. And that's the only thing I'm going to say about that. I just can't, for me, this is just too much money. And that's what it comes down to. This is not because I don't want restrooms. I don't like the location, and I'll continue to say that. But I just have this little voice in my ear that I've heard that, you know, if we don't make some changes, this city can be bankrupt in 5 years. 5 years. I've heard that from people that work in this city and in the know, and that does not go out of my head. And the thought of $250,000 for a park that is essentially pretty seasonal is just too difficult of a pill for me to swallow. And I was elected to be a good steward of people's money, and that's why my vote will remain no.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say that I support this, that this is not using property tax, and that when I vote to affirm this, I'm not changing my mind so that staff does not do all kinds of work and spend $39,000 that then we change our mind for. So I want to say that when I vote to affirm this, I am voting for the people in my district. I'm voting for people who use Wenzel Plaza. And I'm voting for people who use bathrooms when they leave their house, which I think would be every single person in my district. So that's why I'm voting yes.
Yeah, if I can make one clarification. Earlier, Councilmember Wagner asked me if I was aware of any real estate transactions that might be affecting the situation in this area, and I kind of froze for the moment. But thinking about it afterwards, there is an accepted offer on parcel number 7, site number 7 you see on the list, the Blodgett House. I don't believe that closing has taken place yet, but if that's what you're referring to, that is something I'm aware of.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, just to clarify, I was copied on those emails so that I was aware of that, and I knew you were also. The new, I'm told that the new agent was very open to the fact of turning the back half of the Blodgett House into a restaurant area, which would affect both the finance and the construction cost, as well as the accessibility and the suitability in this thing. For that reason, I think the only way I'm going to change my vote on this thing is if I am convinced that we've done the best we can to meet all the parameters, and all the parameters are: is it affordable? Is it something that is going to last for years? Is it something that's not going to drive us to the poorhouse? And finally, not the least of which, is not going to ruin the architectural intent of that plaza. So, but I won't vote for this until I get a good, firm answer on what it would be comparative, and if the new owners of the Blodgett House would be willing to talk with us. We understand that the emails were that they wanted to talk with us.
There was some suggestion, I think.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you again. First off, I guess I'm extremely frustrated that this is just hitting the floor now.
It wasn't my place to bring it.
I'm going to, I guess, also mention that I didn't change my mind on this. I was against this from day one, and I spoke about the same thing since the beginning. But I think from hearing what I heard right now, I think we also have to take into consideration that the bathrooms were not the only thing that we were looking for. If I'm not mistaken, we were looking for storage for equipment for Wenzel Plaza, and we were looking for a green room. And we're not getting either of those. So this is insane to me that we would do this, but I guess par for the course.
Alderman Fire?
I'd like to call for the motion, call for the order, voted.
Call the question.
Call the question up or down. And we talked about this, we beat it to death. Let's either pass it or not pass it. That's my.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments or questions? Motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Stauber, and Alderman Fire, your motion is to call the question.
Call the question.
Alderman Stauber?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item N.
No.
Now you gotta vote
Oh,
on
I'm
them.
sorry.
No, yeah, right.
We have to go.
We have to vote on the main motion, which was to approve.
Yes, now we're voting on the main motion, which was made by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Stauber.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. We move back to item N, request to accept the low bid for renovation of the lower level of City Hall for relocation of the Communications Department, presented by Tom Turchy, Director of Public Works.
All right, we started back in February when the Board of Public Works made a recommendation to relocate the Communications Department into the basement of City Hall Plaza, or City Hall here. We went out and had designs completed and went out for bids. The first round of bids did not come through with any bids. We bid out it a second time, and we got a bid the second time from Altman Construction out of Wisconsin Rapids. And their bid was $48,800 for the main construction of the offices and the studio, as well as the electrical that goes with that. The alternate bid for this project was to do black ceiling tiles and black framing in the studio area, which is an additional $22,200 for a total of $51,000. And so the budget for this project was $50,000. We're only $1,000 difference. There is another project that's taking place in City Hall for some security upgrades as required for, that was part of the CIP projects for this year. I think there will be enough room to absorb that extra $1,000 from this. So I'm recommending that we move forward to approve the construction project for $51,000 to Altman Construction of Wisconsin Rapids.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Just to clarify, you said 22,000?
2,200 for the ceiling tiles, not 22,000.
I just wanted to make clear.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Don't want to scare you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item P, request to consider petition of annexation for property located at 8384 Heritage Drive, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, what you have before you is a request to move forward with an annexation petition. The city received this petition from Interstate Marshfield LLC for a parcel of roughly 10 acres that they're looking to attach to the city of Marshfield. The property is located in the town of Marshfield. It is off of the Heritage Road area, about 750 feet east of the Quick Trip property located there. The applicant has forwarded the petition to the Department of Administration and the town of Marshfield as required by state law. The applicant is also looking to zone the property to LI, light industrial, until a plan is developed for the property. And generally, the council refers these matters to Planning Commission to make a recommendation as to acceptance of the annexation and also the permanent zoning for the parcel. So with that in mind, staff would recommend that council refer this matter to Plan Commission for review and recommendation on the annexation request and on permanent zoning classification.
We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Tompkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Review results of meeting with Mill Creek Business Park tenants on proposed changes to the Mill Creek Business Park covenants, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. This is going to be kind of a general update on the process, along with, the response we got from the Mill Creek Business Park companies out there that have invested and are part of our community in that portion of the city. Just to remind everybody, the Mill Creek Business Park covenants were established back in 1999, so it's been 25 years, a quarter of a century that they've been in place. The process to update them actually began in 2020. Josh Miller, our former Development Services Director, and Dan Kinect, our former Public Works Director, did a lot of the work on that when they recognized there's a need for some changes to kind of update the current standards and best practices. That involves a lot of different issues, includes parking, landscaping, signage, accessory structures, fences, and all those types of things as far as what ought to be required and what the requirements ought to look like. At that time, recreational and nonprofit uses, when they were first put in place, were not a part of the allowed uses for the park. And that's being discussed here and included as a possibility. You know, we've discussed a Mill Creek Community Center proposal that's out there. But I want everyone to recognize, I've said this before, that the updating the covenants is not because of that request. Updating the covenants was going on well before that request for that facility came forward. And it's about many more things than recreational use and nonprofit type of uses. So completion of the following steps have taken place to date so far. Council gave the approval for us to start this process last year. We've reviewed the proposed changes with Marshfield Utilities and with the city attorney. We've met with the Mill Creek Business Park Covenant Committee. That was back in December. There's been some tweaking since that time. And now we've been meeting with the Mill Creek Business Park tenants. And I just want to say up front that their approval, their sign off is not required. I mean, literally you could change the covenants. This body could change the covenants. Even if every business out there didn't like the changes, you would unlikely do that because these people, again, have invested in the community and spent a considerable amount of money on their facilities. But it's not a requirement, but it's good practice to see what those people are thinking and to see if they'd be willing to sign off and say, yeah, we think this is a good deal to make these revisions. So Tom Turchi, our Director of Public Works, and Josh Miller, our Economic Development Consultant, have been working the past couple of months to meet with these companies. As indicated in my staff report, they've met with 5 of the 9 so far and received signed consent forms from 3 of them. We expect a 4th one to come soon. There's a 4th business who's indicated now that they don't have any problems or concerns with it, and they're willing to sign off on that form. There are 4 others that have not responded to our request for meetings, and there's been more than one attempt to reach them. Issues that have been raised during the in-person meetings, and this is not necessarily just from people who are supportive, but just in general things that have come up. Possible parking and traffic safety concerns have been raised a couple of different times in these conversations. The possible impact on the business park overall has been noted as something that people are alert to and watching for since they've made, again, significant investments in their facilities. And also they want to make sure that we don't allow uses out there that are incompatible with each other, that the things fit together so it's a park that has an identity that is cohesive. So you've got the covenants in your packet right now. I'm not asking you to go through them. If you have questions, I know I've talked to Councilmember Tompkins earlier in the day and I've got a couple of responses to her questions. Glad to talk about any of the requirements. Again, Tom Turchi, our Director of Public Works, is here. He's been part of it along with me. He's been involved more than I have actually in this. But other than that, I just laid out the next steps with some tentative dates. These are not necessarily the dates because this is optimistic, but the next steps would be to go back to the Covenants Committee now that we've met with the business park tenants, give them the update you're getting tonight, to meet with the Economic Development Board and have them review the covenants as proposed, get their input. Plan Commission, we want to run it by, and then review with the council. And then after you've made a decision, if you've made an approval to changes, some or all of them, we would then look to record the document with Wood County with a Register of Deeds soon after that. So those are the questions, or that's my report for tonight. Maybe we take some questions to begin with, and then I'll touch on a few of the issues that Councilmember Tompkins brought up earlier about the covenants themselves. But anything about the process or the covenants?
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. I spent most of the day going over this, reading it and redlining it and doing the whole bit. I remember it was, I think, last fall or maybe even early spring here that we formed a covenant committee. But as far as I know, they never met.
The covenant committee's been in place since the beginning of the covenants themselves, back in 1999. They normally only meet when there's a request for a waiver or approval of a plan.
Well, that,
So, so if you may be referring to another committee?
even though there was a housing committee, which has never met either, but we'll talk about that at a later date. But the point is that I see this. I see this coming up, and I thought this would eventually go to the plan commission, to have the plan commission take a look at it first before we got it, before clean up the technicalities and things like that. Although I'll have to admit, Josh Miller is one of the best zoning gurus around, and this definitely has his thumbprint on it very, very nicely, because I mean, he even corrected the grammar in here. It was really great. There were some things that I was pretty upset about. One, you did a survey of the tenants out there in the park. That was I think there were like 7 or 9 of them.
Yeah, there are 9 total.
And then what about the how this will affect the residents over in the Heritage Apartments across the street, Heritage?
Yeah, we haven't talked to them.
That's what I thought. I think that might be a good idea to have the planning commission get a public hearing notice out on that. The other thing, I know this is just a strange coincidence, but all of a sudden, we want to open up the park to non-taxable entities, and I have some real problems with that, because the rest, I think that the TIF is closed on that now. And I think we broke even or something on it, close to it.
But we closed out. We got to the point where we had enough money to pay off all our debt and then close it out and get it back on the general tax roll.
So we did do that, okay.
Successfully.
The problem with it is, if we start letting non-taxable units get into this place, and let them come in more, we're taking the city asset that's non-liquid. We're going to take land, and we're going to take that and give it to a nonprofit. And that means that is that much more or that much less cash we have to distribute to ourselves, the county, and to the school board. So I'm a little nervous about that. I see the provision in here that you're saying that they'll be allowed to go in, they being the nonprofit organizations, they will be allowed to go into that park on the basis of that they can find a way of giving us the same amount of money as we would receive if it was taxable. We got to tighten that up, because what they could do is say, we are going to bring heads in beds, and we're going to bring more people in to stay at the hotels, and we're going to take that increase in the hotels' profitability and say that's given the city its cash reserve. I don't agree with that. I think we need to tighten that up considerably. I also see the EDB is going to be recognized on this, and I have some misgivings on it. About you're changing the structure of the committee and the covenant committee, and now you're having you're going to keep Mackey on there, and that's I'm not sure we should look at that. We should look at, Mackey has been in charge of marketing our property to the outside world for over 20 years. And basically, we would need to check and see if that is the most effective way, and whether they are the ones who should be represented on this committee. The other thing that troubles me a lot is that in several instances here, Marshfield Utilities has given almost full veto power over what the council or what the committee might want to do. There are like 3, I think I counted 3 incidents that they do it. One is on page 3 of the proposal, and the other one is on that's page 220 of our packet tonight. I think that's the one. But anyway, I can understand their need to get control of the wellheads, and that's fine. All required permits go through MU. prohibited and not prohibited uses include nonprofits. I've already talked about that. I guess in the landscaping, no on-street parking, but exceptions can be made to that. So I want to tighten up that exception too. Okay, I'm not going to get the rest of this. I'll get it to you in an email, but thank you.
Yeah, just to know, and I probably didn't say this very clearly when we started this item. Again, I put the covenants in here, and I certainly am willing to take any comments and concerns, and thank you for that. The intent was not to necessarily go through it today. I just thought you should see them again as part of the update. You'll be getting a chance to spend time, maybe more than one meeting, I would guess, when you see the copy that comes back after these other bodies have looked at it. But I do respect and I appreciate your questions. I think just to comment real briefly on the Marshfield Utilities part, I think that, and I'll have to look more deeply at where they're referenced. The intent is that some of the businesses that are going to locate out there have certain electrical and water implications in what they do, and making sure that in fact the system can adequately handle what they're proposing. But we can take a look at all this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Alderman Stauber?
Thank you. Two questions. One regarding non-taxable entities or organizations located in these parks. There was some discussion about alternative vehicles or, fund generated rent generating sources, and pilot payment in lieu of taxes comes to mind. And I would like to hear from legal, if we were to enter or create a payment in lieu of tax, a pilot, the enforceability. I seem to recall that it sounds nice. It's kind of like a gentleman's agreement, if you will, but we maybe don't have the enforceability with that. And my second question is on Article 3, Paragraph B, a 30-day comment. So the way I understand it, if there's an applicant and the covenant committee does not take action within 30 days, they're automatically approved.
Right.
And that it seems a little concerning. And I wonder if there's any concern from staff on that.
Yeah, I'll take the second part. I actually probably take the first part because the city attorney and I have talked about this before. But the second part, and this was flagged by Councilmember Tompkins earlier in the day, the notion that if 30 days goes by and we don't act, their proposal is automatically approved. Is that potentially detrimental to us? And I think maybe we want to look at wording that would suggest that if the committee hasn't met within 30 days, because sometimes the committee even meets and has questions and they want to have a follow-up meeting if they have issues they need to work through. I think it's based on the idea that we want to be responsive government and not just sit on things, but that provision certainly can be looked at again. And the other piece, and I know, like I said, that city attorney and I have talked about this before, the way that we would enforce a pilot, so to speak, a payment in lieu of taxes would be, we're selling land, it would likely be part of a development agreement, and that could be worked into the DA.
So that's the distinction between the typical situation where you're looking at a pilot agreement where somebody's saying, I don't owe taxes, and we've dealt with that recently, and you enter into an agreement to say, well, all right, you don't have to pay taxes, but you're going to pay this pilot as part of that. Well, that's all set in the tax arena, whereas here we're going to be entering into a development agreement, and so we can incorporate it into a development agreement, and then it becomes binding because there's a contract that was a quid pro quo. An exchange of consideration between the parties. That is a different situation than someone entering into an agreement saying, I don't have any taxes, but I'll agree to pay taxes even though I have no obligation to. Here, we're actually exchanging something as consideration as part of the contract.
I have a follow-up then to that. Thank you for the answer. So I've been speaking a lot in hypothetical. So hypothetical, the project turns out to be a boondoggle. We've got a developer's agreement in place. Payment in lieu of taxes included in the developer's agreement, but the project goes south. It just doesn't work out, or maybe they're only there for 3 years or whatever. And we will have seriously changed the intent of the park. Mill Creek, in one example. Do we have any recourse in that situation?
To me, that situation is going to be very much dependent upon the strength of the agreement we enter into. So it's a contract, and we have to look at those things anytime we enter into any development agreement. And you've seen various kinds come across. So, that's something you'd look at in terms of the contract, the terms of the contract, what do you have to enforce it? And then in this situation, I think what we would be doing is, remember, the difference between the typical where we're talking about, and I've cautioned, I don't like pilots, but there's been disagreement with other council who came here and were suggesting we should use pilots. That's not my position. I've been very clear about that. So that is not an option in my opinion. Here, the difference is we own that property. So when we transfer it, we could put it as a condition that runs with the land as a condition to that deed. So basically we can enforce it because that's part of our overall transaction. As consideration for us giving you this property, we're putting a restriction on this deed that says that it can't go in a particular way in the future. Not different, however, than what you're really looking at right here today, which is changing some of the deed restrictions that we have as part of that overall development.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, just so we all understand, we probably talked about this before, but when we talk about a payment in lieu of taxes, we're talking about the city's portion, not the full amount that would normally go to the county school district and tech college, but it would make the city whole for the amount that we would normally expect to receive in taxes. I also want to say one more thing too. We talk about some of these provisions like the recreational uses and the nonprofit uses. I think staff understands, we've talked about this a little bit before, some of these provisions may be debated maybe significantly as we get into the review later on. So we appreciate the comments being raised about that topic.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Now that you mentioned about the other taxing jurisdictions, can you refresh my memory on the breakdown on how those go? And then I guess explain if there's any like this circumstance where the other taxing entities could be out in the cold, basically, they would not get their portion. Is that what I'm understanding?
And again, this would be subject to the development agreement and how it's written. I mean, the typical pilot agreement is a good faith effort by an organization to make the city whole for its cost related to the services they get. Typically, they reference police, fire, public works services, and they end up paying generally the city's portion of the tax obligation. What would have been the tax obligation if they were taxable. I suppose a development agreement could say anything that was worded to be, but that would be the normal expectation, would be the pilot payment would be to reimburse the city for what we would have received in tax revenue. And, the city's portion right now of your tax bill is, 40-some%. It was a little bit lower until the school district levy went down this last year. Our percentage will probably fall back closer to 40% again, our share of the pie.
Any other comments, questions?
If it's okay, Natasha, maybe I can follow up with you on the side because you raised some good questions. We can talk tomorrow. There are some specific points that I want to address. They may come up later.
Moving on to item R, response to Councilmember Ragel's request for information on city policy for mayoral appointments to committees, boards, and commissions, and if letters from the candidates may be provided to the council, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we've had conversations at the last couple of meetings about the mayor's appointments. So I just want to clarify a little bit where we sit in terms of the city code and then suggest an idea moving forward, which I think was kind of touched on at the last meeting anyway. Just a quick reminder that the appointments are generally made by the mayor and subject to council approval. The exception is the Utilities Commission. That's a vote of the council that's called up by city code. The reference for the process is section 3-66 of the municipal code. And again, referring to the fact that the mayor appoints and the council's role is to either accept or reject particular nominees. There are some committees, boards, and commissions that are referred to in Chapter 2 rather than Chapter 3 of the municipal code. But they generally have references similar within their sections about mayor appointment and council confirmation. So historically in the past, nothing or very little has been required in writing from interested persons. In fact, I remember when I came here back in 2011, Chris Meyer would sometimes refer to jokingly looking in the phone book to try and find candidates because it's hard to find people who want to be on some of these advisory bodies. So we didn't come to these meetings with anything in writing. Appointments are the mayor's choice. I mentioned that about accepting or rejecting. Sorry, I'm repeating myself there. But the next point I wanted to hit on is that the council's made a point about wanting to have some information about the candidates that they're approving to be on these bodies. And I think that is appropriate. So my recommendation would be that we request that the candidates provide emails and letters, but that the mayor then share as part of the council agenda packet with the council, just the one from the individual that he or she is recommending for appointment. So you can see some sort of at least a short bio of the person that you'll be taking on if you vote in favor, but not all the other applicants, just simply the one that the mayor is recommending for appointment. I see that as a kind of a compromise between the two positions. But again, keep in mind that through it all, the mayor's appointments are his or her prerogative entirely to be made at their discretion.
Alderman Marshall?
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Barg. I do not think that we need to see any letters. Those letters go to the mayor. She or he or whoever's up there, spend plenty enough time going through all that. We would have to be here for maybe 1 or 2 full meetings to go over every single appointment that we would have to go through. If we do one, we have to do them all. If you're going to show us one letter, then we should see 10 of them. I don't want to even jump into that. I think that they make the appointments. This year, there was some maybe unpopular decisions or anything like that, and the councilmen have the opportunity to pull them out as they were pulled out at that time. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that moving forward, we should change anything to give us a letter or anything from the person that's being appointed. That's the mayor's job to do that. That's why the mayor is elected to be the mayor for the city of Marshfield. And especially when there are no people that want to be on the, there's no one that wants to be on the bid bond. Hey, you got to look around for somebody. You got to search for somebody. You got to search for somebody. So then they put the mayor puts 2 or 3 hours of searching for somebody. Then they got to have somebody write that letter up and then to present it to us so that we can say, hey, yeah, that's a good candidate after she spent time to get that put together. Or he, sorry, I don't want to, this could be down the road. This could be 10 years down the road because we're changing something. I disagree with what you said. Thank you.
I respect that.
Any other comments, questions? This is discretion of the council.
Mr. Reigel.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Mr. Reigel.
Mr. Reigel, I apologize. Sorry.
No, thank you, guys. And I understand Mr. Varshall's point, and I'm going to disagree with him too respectfully, because I 100% appreciate the effort the mayor has to put in. I wouldn't expect us as council, that is, to try to sway who the appointee is. That is out of place by council. Council should not have a say to say who the appointment is. However, if we're giving our blessing as, hey, this appointment's an okay appointment, I think we should at least know something about them. I'm not asking for a resume or anything of the sort. I'm thinking just a quick blurb, nothing formal, something that can take 2 minutes to do, but something so we at least have an idea of why we're voting for it, because otherwise we're voting blind. And once again, I do not want to see, if 10 people apply for one position, I don't want to see the other 9. It's none of my business. It's the mayor's business to decide who he or she feels is the best fit. But at the same time, I have a hard time saying I can give my blessing or voting for or against someone without really knowing anything with it. Now, if there's a better idea, I'm all ears. But my only concern is, how do I vote? How can I consciously vote for someone when I don't know anything about that person? But once again, if there are other ideas, I'm all for it. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. But I'm also not going to die on this hill either. So thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
I kind of understand the point trying to be made here, but I agree with Brian in the respect that this is her job, or whoever is in that spot, to do this. I mean, we know this, the people that vote for her know this. And it is a tough job, and I know she spent a lot of time, and I know she, removed names so that she would show no bias towards people she knew, and she based all of her decisions on resumes. And, what I look at is we could sit here and micromanage everything. When the streets department wants to hire somebody to pour concrete, we could ask to see every resume and micromanage that. We could ask to see every resume that comes in for, somebody that Jessica's going to hire to work in the clerk's office. And we don't do that, right? We acknowledge that the human resources director has that ability and is authorized to do that. I just don't see the difference here. The mayor is authorized to pick these people. Yes, we approve her appointments or disapprove them. But I just think it's sort of, I get the curiosity that you want to make sure that you have good people in these spots, but in the end, it really isn't our selection, it is hers. Again, I'm not going to die on this hill either, but I do see the correlation. We don't look at, we don't approve every employee that's hired, and we certainly have to count on them also, so.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I think I would lean definitely in that same direction. I guess my concern is if all we're requesting is an email, how much do you know about that person? You already have the name. You can do a background check on them. You can do whatever you want to do. The internet is endless out there. It just seems like an extra step that you're not actually going to gain anything out of, depending on what is in that email or letter that you get. It just seems inefficient.
Alderman Stauber?
I don't need to see all the applicants. My primary concern was the institutional knowledge, the dedication, and the experience that existing committee boards and commission members bring to us. And there was an argument made that if you bring in new people, you have fresh ideas, but you also have fresh ideas with existing people. And the library is a good example. The Parks and Rec, the Bear Pen is a good example. So I would not, and if you got someone that wants to participate in city government and volunteer, great. But I would not bump someone off who is, ready, willing, and able to continue their work. And the other thing I was reminded of when I was at the community center of the old library, many of these individuals not only give time, but they give money. And you'll see names on rooms and such that people have dedicated more than just meeting time and that kind of thing. They've really put their true passion in some of these projects. So, thank you.
Alderman Giles?
Yes, I just want to echo what Councilmember Rigel was saying. If you look at street employees, everyone else that's hired, we don't have a vote on those. And here we are making a vote. So I feel just a brief synopsis of why they want to serve on the board isn't really going to harm anything. And it's not intrusive. It's just giving us a little bit more info.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I hear a lot of times people talk about they want transparency and they want truth in government. And I think this would just be an easy way. And I agree with you that a compromise is nice. Just to say, hey, we're introducing this person. If you don't know who they are, it was great to get this letter in the packet to find out his background, what he does, how he serves the community. That was just super helpful for me as a voting person. It's not taking away from saying that it's just not taking away from the mayor's job. It's just helping us do our job. So are you looking for a motion to change this, or what are you looking for?
Well, whenever I put discretion to the council, it's just up to the body whether they want to make a motion. As it stands here right now, we're using the same approach that we've always used, but there was some discussion and even some heartburn at previous meetings about how the appointment process works. So I thought I'd offer this as a potential compromise to give some look at the people being put on these boards and commissions and committees, and yet not open the door to really violate the intent of what the mayor's responsibility is. But it's up to you whether you want to make it. There is a motion on the floor, I see, but that's up to you.
We have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, and your motion is?
So I would move that any appointee that the council needs to vote on, that they would be given some sort of information, whether it's an email or a letter or whatever, that introduces the person in their own words before we vote.
Second by Alderman Giles, is that your intent? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Item S, request to approve appointment of Jake Bernardi, 919 West North Street, to the Plan Commission for a 3-year term ending April 2027, presented by myself. You have it in your packet. We have a motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Item T, request to approve the appointment of Carol Knuff, 126020 Oak Lane Road, Stratford, to the Business Improvement District Board to fill a vacant position ended in April 2027, presented by me. You have your information in your packets. We have a motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman Stauber?
Is this to wait, to suspend the rules? Because otherwise,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yes.
It could be, but I didn't hear that.
We have a motion by Alderman Spiros.
And the rules.
Do we have a second on that motion? We need a second.
Yeah, I
on the
think
motion?
Hang on a
Brian's
second.
raising it.
Okay. Please vote to suspend the rules.
Mr. Weigel?
That's all right.
Nay.
That motion passes. Now we go back to vote on Carol Knuff to be on the Business Improvement District Board. Motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman Stauber?
Would we call this a change in requirement and oversight on the part of the applicants, or a technicality that just is new, I guess, to the process?
Do you mean suspending the rules and voting
No,
tonight?
I'm sorry. I'm good with that. I would be more clear. So why didn't the two individuals comply with the requirement? Is it a new requirement? Was it an oversight on their part, or what brought this up?
Yeah, I think maybe the city clerk might want to go beyond this, but the people involved, both of them did not take the oath of office within 10 days. I think that's been a state requirement for some time, actually. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So be an oversight then.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Weigel?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item U, request to approve the appointment of Randy Gershman, 311 Lay Avenue, to the Fire and Police Commission to fill a vacant position ending in April of 2029, presented by myself. Alderman Wagner?
Yes, I move to suspend the rules and vote.
Alderman Spears, are you in agreement? We have a motion to suspend the rules. Yes.
Can I make a comment? The mayor said it correctly, 2029. It says on the agenda 2027. That's my fault. So it should be April 2029.
Please vote to suspend the rules.
Mr. Weigel?
Nay.
That motion passes.
That fails.
Now we'll go back to the original motion.
That motion failed. We're not suspending the rules.
It takes 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
Takes a 2/3 vote.
2/3 present.
So we'll go to May.
Okay, May 28th, we will have the second reading. Okay, item V, suggested items for further agendas. Seeing none.
I have one, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would like to evaluate the need for an economic development board and possibly consider ending that organization.
Any other suggestions for further agenda items? Seeing none, move on to item W, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Possible development project in Mill Creek Business Park, possible development project in Yellowstone Industrial Park. We have a motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman O'Reilly. Please vote to go into closed session.
Mr. Rigel?
Aye.
We're in closed session.